and I'm delighted to say we are joined in the studio right now by Mr. Nigel Farage from the Reform Party. Obviously not the leader of the Reform Party. What's the official title?
Honorary President.
Honorary President of the Reform Party. Kicked off yesterday in Dover with an event at which you unveiled a new MP candidate for Dover, Howard Cox. But you also sort of kick-started, I suppose, the Reform campaign about stopping the boats, about how the Conservative Party have kind of lost the plot. But you also came up for an awful lot of the usual kind of barrage the Farage type stuff, didn't you?
I did. I mean, look, I was there to say the reason the election's on July the 4th is dead simple. The big promise of planes going to Rwanda was not going to happen.
Right.
They weren't going. There's no way that court in Strasbourg was going to allow this to happen. Sunak knew that. He knew if the planes didn't go, one of his flagship policies would have been absolutely catastrophically torn to pieces, and the Reform vote would have gone even higher. So that, I was there making the point that actually the Rwanda plan doesn't work, all the while we've got a foreign court in Strasbourg telling us how we can control our borders. Simple as.
Yeah.
Worth pointing out, though, that Starmer and the Labour Party have nothing to say. Tackle the gangs. We've been saying that about the drugs gangs in Britain for decades. It makes no difference.
It doesn't work, no.
There's too much money involved.
Well, I've been saying this morning, you know, only a week ago we didn't know there was an election, right? It didn't happen until 5 o'clock last Wednesday. But ever since the starting gun has been fired, there have been all sorts of conversations about national service. We've got today the end of the Mickey Mouse degree. We've got the NHS being presented as something that the Labour Party can fix. There hasn't really been any immigration policy which has been unveiled by either party.
You know why?
Nigel Farage, a prominent figure in British politics and a key player in the Reform Party, has long been vocal about his stance on immigration and the impact of Labour Party policies. His concerns about mass immigration and the management of the UK's borders have been central to his political agenda, especially in light of recent events and electoral outcomes. Farage's argument revolves around the idea that the Labour Party, historically and presently, has pursued policies that have significantly increased the levels of immigration to the UK. He claims that these policies have had profound implications on the social and economic fabric of the country. According to Farage, the Labour Party's approach to immigration has been one of openness, which he believes has led to a surge in the number of migrants entering the UK, often through illegal means. This perspective forms the backbone of his critique of the current and previous Labour governments.
You know why? Because Labour opened the door to mass immigration on a scale this country had never seen, and the Conservatives have accelerated it.
Yeah.
The numbers are even bigger. So neither side wants to talk about legal immigration. Neither side will dare talk about the fact that parts of our towns and cities are literally becoming unrecognisable in every way. And I talked at the weekend on Sky with Trevor Phillips about British values being undermined.
Yeah.
Look at that demonstration last night in Parliament Square.
Incredible.
I mean, were they British values?
Well, they were shouting for jihad, as far as I could make out.
Yeah.
And they were also there from 6 in the afternoon, and they were supposed to finish at 8. They were still there, being cleared out by the police at 2 a.m. I mean, you know, my father used to say to me when he watched these demonstrations in the Middle East, what do these people do for a living? You know, there doesn't seem to be anybody actually doing any work.
It's okay. The welfare state looks after everybody.
Yeah,
it's fine.
It absolutely does. But, you know, then you see the Angela Rayner story from today, where she's been seen at the weekend talking to a group of what can only be described as Muslim community leaders, I'm assuming, promising them that if Labour gets in, they will recognise Palestine, which is not even Labour Party policy.
No, and did you notice? I mean, she was begging, actually.
Yeah.
Begging for vote. Did you notice?
Quite craven.
Not a woman in the room.
No.
Did you notice the celebrations in Leeds, Bradford, Burnley? All the men outside chanting. Not a woman to be seen.
Yeah.
So we're heading for sectarian politics, in which women are excluded, which virtually takes us back 100 years in terms of our advancement as a society and the way in which we've changed. So my job, Mike, over the next 6 weeks is to travel around the country and to try, through the media, to challenge Starmer and Sunak to start honestly debating issues that they would rather brush under the carpet, and at the same time support reform candidates.
Now, of course, many people said that, you know, you should debate Rishi Sunak. I've had a couple of messages from people before you came in today to say, why don't you challenge Keir Starmer to a debate? Because actually he's more likely to be the next Prime Minister. Would you do that?
I'm going to. I'm going to. I half did it yesterday, but I'll make it more formal over the next 2 days.
The recent electoral victory of the Labour Party has, according to Farage, opened the floodgates for even more immigration. He suggests that the celebratory scenes among migrant migrant communities following the Labour win are indicative of the party's perceived leniency towards immigration enforcement and border control. Farage views these celebrations as a sign that migrants expect more favourable conditions and policies under a Labour government, which he argues will lead to increased numbers entering the country. Farage's concerns are not just about the numbers, but also about the cultural and social impacts of mass immigration. He frequently cites examples of communities that have seen significant demographic changes, arguing that these shifts lead to the erosion of traditional British values and social cohesion. He points to areas where he believes integration has not been successful, leading to tensions and a sense of dislocation among long-term residents.
I mean, look, when it comes to the boats, and I'm going to say this, I was there 4 years ago, going out into the Channel.
You were on here 4 years ago with me.
Talking about all of this, and I was predicting that this was going to become, that the trickle would become a flood, would become an invasion. Now, they can't bear me using that
word. They don't like that word.
But it's 3,800 boats. Just think about that.
Right.
It's almost unbelievable that it's that big. It's like D-Day in reverse.
Yeah. Well, you said this yesterday. And also, when it went over the 10,000 at the weekend, it was 5 boats, I think, all of which had more than 50 people on them.
Yep.
So these are not really even small boats anymore.
No, they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, the average 4 years ago was about 15 per boat. Now it's 50.
Yeah.
That's the big difference. But nobody has been involved with this issue more than I have. And just as Nick Clegg, when he was Deputy Prime Minister, challenged me to a debate on Europe, I think on illegal immigration, if they want to have a conversation, I'm the person to come to.
Now, Henry Bolton, who was on with us yesterday, funnily enough, was looking forward to your speech down there in Dover. But he said afterwards he didn't think that you'd actually said what you would have done to stop the boats. He said, we know that reform would have...
One of Farage's key points is the difference in immigration levels between the Labour and Conservative governments. He argues that while the Conservatives have not been as stringent as he would like, they have still been more restrictive than Labour. He points to statistics from the last full year of the Labour government, comparing them to current figures to illustrate his point that immigration has increased under Labour's influence. Farage uses these comparisons to argue that the Labour Party's policies are directly responsible for the higher levels of immigration seen today. Farage also criticises what he sees as the inadequacy of Labour's policies to deal with illegal immigration. He argues that the Labour Party lacks the political will to tackle the issue effectively, instead offering what he considers to be superficial solutions that do not address the root causes. He is particularly critical of the Labour Party's stance on deportations, arguing that the number of deportations has significantly decreased since they last held power. According to Farage, this decrease is indicative of a broader reluctance to enforce immigration laws strictly.
Have a plan.
Deport people who come illegally. And here's the funny thing. Here is how the national debate has gone so far to the left under 14 years of Conservatives. In the year 2009 to 10, the last full year of the Labour government, they deported 45,000 illegal immigrants. We now deport a few thousand if we're lucky.
And we've done away with the detention centres that the Blair government used to have.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the answer, what I was saying yesterday, Henry, if you're listening, was that all the while we have a foreign court overseeing this. That's the Gordian knot you have to cut. Once you cut it, you're free to do what the hell you want. But people who come illegally have to know they will be deported.
Well, listen to me. When we talk to people about whether or not you should have stood and whether or not you should have run as a candidate, they say, well, we're a bit disappointed.
I know.
They wanted you to be the sort of the torchbearer, if you like, because you are the leader, regardless of Richard Tyson. I'm going to ask you about him in a minute. He's somebody that's very well known to me as well. You're considered as the leader of reform, even though you're not technically the leader. But you said that you didn't want to run because there wasn't enough time for a campaign.
Can we deal with disappointment first?
Yes.
All right. I was going to launch my campaign tomorrow.
Right.
Tomorrow. To say, right, that's it. 6 months on the road campaigning. Whether Sunak caught a whiff of that or not, I don't know.
Right.
Maybe he did. It's not impossible. Maybe he did. I can't start in a constituency from scratch in 6 weeks and come and talk to you, travel around the country. I literally cannot do both. So it's a big decision. What do you do?
Right.
And I want reform to get many millions of votes. It is going to get many millions of votes. I very much hope we get that spearhead into Westminster. Because I tell you something, Labour are going to win. It's over. Labour are
because that's the other
going to
question I get.
In addition to his critique of Labour's immigration policies, Farage also addresses the role of the judiciary and international bodies in shaping the UK's immigration policy. He is particularly critical of the influence of the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, which he believes has overstepped its bounds in dictating the UK's immigration policies. Farage argues that the UK should have full control over its borders and immigration laws without interference from foreign courts. This sovereignty over immigration policy is a central theme in his political rhetoric. Farage's concerns extend to the broader implications of mass immigration on public services and infrastructure. He argues that the influx of migrants puts undue strain on services such as the NHS, education and housing. He suggests that these services are already stretched to their limits and that increased immigration will only exacerbate the problems. Farage believes that the Labour Party's policies do not adequately address these challenges, instead placing additional burdens on already overtaxed systems. Another significant aspect of Farage's argument is the economic impact of immigration. He acknowledges that immigration can bring economic benefits, but argues that these benefits are often outweighed by the costs. Farage contends that low-skilled immigration in particular can lead to wage suppression and increased competition for jobs, which he believes disproportionately affects working-class Britons. He argues that Labour's immigration policies do not take these economic impacts into account and instead focus on the perceived benefits without addressing the drawbacks. Farage also touches on the issue of national security, arguing that uncontrolled immigration can lead to increased risks. He suggests that lax immigration policies make it easier for individuals with malicious intent to enter the country, posing a threat to national security. Farage believes that a more robust approach to border control and immigration enforcement is necessary to protect the country from these risks.
Get from people is, why do you not look forward to more of a sort of, rather than looking forward to coming second if at best, or coming in a third maybe at worst, why not look at actually possibly going all out and winning?
Because it's impossible. You know, we have a system that is, if this was proportional representation, an Italian style system, a Dutch style system, I promise you I'd be sitting in here saying to you I can beat Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
But we don't have that system. And because of that system and the way in which it works, people do, however they think, vote differently. But what we can do and what we need to do is to realign the centre-right of British politics. And if Reform aren't strong and Reform don't have a presence in that parliament, we can't do it. The Conservatives are going to be in opposition, but they won't be the opposition. They hate each other. They disagree on virtually everything. They honestly, policy-wise, serve almost no purpose. So I think that is a better, bigger thing I can do in the next 6 weeks than going to a constituency and spending time.
In response to these concerns, Farage advocates for a series of policy changes that he believes would better manage immigration and its impacts. He calls for stricter border controls, increased deportations of illegal immigrants, and a reduction in overall immigration numbers. Farage also supports the idea of implementing a points-based immigration system similar to those used in countries like Australia, which he believes would prioritise skilled immigrants who can contribute positively to the economy. Farage's critique of Labour's immigration policies is not just about the policies themselves, but also about what he perceives as a lack of transparency and honesty in the political debate. He argues that both Labour and the Conservatives have failed to engage in a meaningful discussion about immigration and its impacts, often resorting to platitudes and vague promises rather than concrete solutions. Farage believes that this lack of honest debate has led to public frustration and a sense that politicians are not addressing the real issues. Despite his criticisms, Farage acknowledges the complexity of the immigration issue and the challenges involved in finding effective solutions. He suggests that a balanced approach is needed, one that recognises the benefits of immigration while also addressing the challenges and ensuring that the system is fair and manageable. Farage believes that this balanced approach is not currently being offered by either Labour or the Conservatives, which is why he sees the Reform Party as a necessary alternative.
We head to the high seas now, where we are joined during this electoral campaign. There he is, ahoy, we say to the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage. Nigel.
Good morning.
What takes you to the high seas then, and where are you?
We are literally mid-channel now between Dover and Calais, and Behind me, you can see a white dinghy. There are 45 people on board. Behind it, you can see an escort vessel, because that's what the French do. Despite the 500 million quid we've given them, they literally, once these boats are afloat, escort them to our 12-mile line where they hand them over to Border Force. That of itself, I think, is outrageous. But the significance of this boat is that this number on this vessel take it beyond 50,000 that have come since Rishi Sunak has been Prime Minister. During Boris Johnson's time, 68,000 came, but he was there for double the period. So don't delude yourselves. This problem is getting worse. So we're witnessing a really very, very big, significant number today. And of course, Sunak talks about Rwanda and much else. But I'm afraid I see no sign under either Labour or the Conservative parties of this problem ending. I don't think they've got the guts to do what it takes.
So, at the very least, reform in terms of what it takes would get the French to say, if you spot a boat, you bring it back to your shores, you don't bring it over to our shores.
Well, absolutely, because these boats are illegally taking off from France. They're vulnerable boats. And yes, the French Navy should be taking them straight back. Quite how we've managed to give them £500 million and to allow this practice to continue is completely and utterly beyond.
Farage's stance on immigration is part of a broader political philosophy that emphasises national sovereignty, cultural identity and the need for political reform. He argues that the UK needs to regain control over its laws and borders, reduce the influence of foreign courts and implement policies that reflect the interests and values of the British people. Farage believes that the Reform Party is uniquely positioned to offer this vision and to challenge the political status quo. Nigel Farage's viewpoint on immigration is also deeply connected to his broader vision for the UK's political landscape. He sees the current immigration policies as a symptom of a wider failure in British politics, which he argues is characterised by a lack of accountability and responsiveness to the concerns of ordinary citizens. Farage often highlights what he sees as a disconnect between the political elite and the general public, suggesting that mainstream parties like Labour and the Conservatives are out of touch with the realities faced by many Britons. This perspective leads Farage to advocate for a comprehensive overhaul of the political system. He supports reforms that would make politicians more accountable to their constituents and less influenced by external bodies and interests. For instance, Farage has been a long-time critic of the UK's membership in the European Union, a stance that culminated in his prominent role in the Brexit campaign. He views Brexit as a crucial step towards regaining national sovereignty, but he also believes that the principles behind it, such as self-determination and local control, should be extended to other areas of policy, including immigration.
I was just wanting to talk to you a little bit about the claims that the Prime Minister was making during the debates last night. He was saying that migrants in Calais were waiting for a Labour administration because of the deterrent of Rwanda. I mean, you've just... what's the phrase I'm looking for? Truth busted that or fact-checked that for us this morning. That's clearly not the case.
I mean, the arguments that Rishi Sunak and James Cleverly are putting up, I mean, they honestly, they don't bear credibility in any way at all. Were this lot behind me waiting for a Labour government? Were they hell? It's over 128,000 people have come, 90% of them young men, many coming from war zones, from areas plagued by terrorism, gang crime, many coming with attitudes towards women that we would find completely unacceptable. I mean, how much worse could it be under Labour than it's been under him? And my hunch is that he had to call the election early because he'd promised planes would go to Rwanda in July. He told us people were in detention already, waiting to go. Do you know every single one of those people has been released on bail and at least half have absconded already? There were no boats going to Rwanda. We will not solve this problem until we leave the European Court of Human Rights.
Nigel, I wanted to ask you, and this is related, so bear with me, but you'll be aware that the IFS yesterday, on your tax plan, said that you were poisoning the entire political debate because what you were proposing was wholly unattainable. And I want to ask if you think it's fair that you could also say that about your arguments when it comes to these illegal crossings. A lot of people voted for Brexit on what you were promising, which was that this problem would be resolved. It's got worse. Yeah. I know you'll tell me that the ECHR now is the key to this problem, but we would replace the ECHR presumably with our own enshrined human rights laws because we are a civilised country.
One of the reforms Farage proposes is the introduction of a more direct form of democracy. He suggests that mechanisms like referendums should be used more frequently to ensure that major policy decisions reflect the will of the people. Farage argues that this approach would lead to more sensible and sustainable immigration policies, as it would force politicians to take public opinion seriously. He believes that if given the choice, the majority of Britons would favour stricter immigration controls and a more selective approach to admitting new residents. Farage's emphasis on cultural identity also plays a significant role in his immigration stance. He argues that uncontrolled immigration can lead to the erosion of national identity and the dilution of cultural values. Farage often points to the experiences of other European countries, which he claims have struggled to integrate large numbers of migrants, leading to social tensions and cultural clashes. He believes that the UK should learn from these examples and implement policies that prioritise cultural cohesion and integration. To achieve this, Farage advocates for policies that encourage immigrants to adopt British values and integrate into society. He suggests that language proficiency and knowledge of British culture should be key criteria for granting residency and citizenship. Farage also supports measures that would require immigrants to demonstrate their commitment to integrating into British society, such as participating in community activities and adhering to local customs and laws.
And lawyers would still find problems with detaining people who are legally or legitimately trying to flee war and other situations. So my question to you is what you're promising people truly attainable?
It's all attainable. Brexit Britain can do what the hell it likes. That was the point of leaving. You need a government that's prepared to carry it out. And sadly, we lack the will to do so. And it isn't just the £8 million a day for the hotels. I genuinely believe this should be declared a national security emergency. We have no idea who these young men are, no idea what they've been through, no idea what their intentions are. And that is just how serious this situation is. I think actually, logically, as a result of Brexit, we should leave the ECHR anyway. It's becoming an increasingly activist court. It's making it very difficult to deport those that come to our country illegally. It even intervened recently in Switzerland and told the Swiss government it had to obey net zero rules. We should have no part of it whatsoever. Let's get that sovereignty back, and once it's back, let's exercise it properly, because that's what the voters wanted more than once.
And directly on his comments on your, I know you didn't want to call it a manifesto, I think it was a social contract, but when it came to your pledges on politics, on tax and finance, he said that your rhetoric, and to be fair, he levelled the same criticism to the Greens as well, was creating a tax lock arms race, which was hugely damaging to public discourse. Do you accept any of that?
Absolutely none of it. What I do accept is that on economics and on budgets, what we put forward was far more ambitious than the Labour and Conservative governments, who, frankly, on these things, you literally cannot tell them apart. What we are saying is we have to get the level at which people pay tax up to £20,000 a year.
In discussing the impact of immigration on public services, Farage often highlights the strain placed on the NHS. He argues that the influx of migrants has led to increased demand for healthcare services, exacerbating existing challenges such as long waiting times and resource shortages. Farage believes that a more controlled immigration policy would help alleviate these pressures and ensure that the NHS can provide high-quality care to all residents. He also calls for increased investment in public services to accommodate population growth in a sustainable manner. Farage's economic arguments against mass immigration focus on the labour market and wage dynamics. He contends that an oversupply of labour, particularly in low-skilled sectors, leads to wage suppression and reduced job opportunities pays for native workers. Farage argues that businesses often prefer to hire migrants willing to accept lower wages, which can undermine the bargaining power of local workers and contribute to economic inequality. He believes that a more selective immigration policy focused on attracting skilled workers would better serve the UK's economic interests. National security is another area where Farage believes immigration policy needs significant reform. He argues that current policies are too lenient and fail to adequately screen and vet individuals entering the country. Farage suggests that this leniency increases the risk of criminal activity and terrorism. He advocates for stricter background checks and a more rigorous vetting process to ensure that those entering the UK do not pose a threat to public safety. Farage also supports the idea of increased cooperation with international partners to share intelligence and improve border security. Farage's critique of Labour's immigration policies is also tied to his broader opposition to what he sees as political correctness and a reluctance to address difficult issues. He argues that politicians often avoid discussing immigration candidly for fear of being labelled as xenophobic or racist. Farage believes that this reluctance stifles honest debate and prevents the implementation of effective policies. He calls for a more open and honest discussion about immigration, one that acknowledges both its benefits and its challenges. In his vision for the future, Farage sees the Reform Party as a key player in reshaping the UK's approach to immigration and governance more broadly. He believes that the party can offer a clear alternative to the status quo, with policies that prioritise national sovereignty, cultural identity and public accountability. Farage is confident that with the right approach, the UK can develop an immigration system that is fair, sustainable and aligned with the interests of its citizens. Farage's stance on immigration and his broader political philosophy reflect a deep scepticism of centralised power and a belief in the importance of local control. He argues that decisions about immigration and other key policies should be made as close to the people as possible, rather than being dictated by distant bureaucracies or international bodies. This belief in localism is a central tenet of Farage's political ideology and underpins his vision for the UK's future. As Farage continues to advocate for his views, he faces significant opposition from those who believe that his policies are overly restrictive and fail to recognise the benefits of immigration. Critics argue that Farage's approach could harm the economy, limit cultural diversity and damage the UK's international reputation. They suggest that a more balanced approach, which recognises the contributions of immigrants while addressing legitimate concerns, is necessary. In response to these criticisms, Farage argues that his policies are not about closing the door to immigration, but about ensuring that it is managed in a way that benefits the country as a whole. He believes that a controlled and selective immigration system can bring the best of both worlds, attracting skilled and motivated individuals who contribute to the economy and society while avoiding the negative impacts of uncontrolled migration. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. For more content like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel.